Jesus sees you. Jesus wants to meet you there. Maybe you're emotionally or spiritually thirsty. You're tired of trying to prove yourself, tired of trying to hide your struggles, trying to put up a facade, fix it all by yourself. He knows your whole story, all of it, and he won't turn his back on you. He sees past our mistakes, our baggage, and yet he still invites us to something better. He doesn't need us to be perfect. He just wants us to be real. He's not here to shame us for where we've been. He's here to offer us a way forward. And when you're ready, he'll meet you at your well with the living water that'll change everything. As Rhoda said, if I haven't met you, my name is Kimmy. I'm one of the worship leaders here. And yes, we'll be continuing today's sermon series called Meeting Jesus. And in this story today, we're going to meet someone where Jesus meets them in the midst of their struggle. Let's have another word of prayer before we begin here. God, thank you for bringing us all here today, whether we're in person or whether we're watching online. God, I just pray that you open our hearts, calm my spirit, help me to relay the message that you are just this great God, and we'll be looking at your character, part of it anyway, because you're so amazing, and this is just one part of who you are, and I hope that we can see what a loving God you are through this story. View this today and let us feel your presence here. Amen. So before we get into the story, I wanted to go into Psalm 139, verses 1 to 6, if you want to follow along. I'll be reading from the Voice translation. It starts like this. O Eternal One, you have explored my heart and know exactly who I am. You even know the small details, like when I take a seat and when I stand up again. Even when I'm far away, you know what I'm thinking. You observe my wanderings and my sleeping, my waking and my dreaming, and you know everything I do in more detail than I even know. You know what I'm going to say long before I say it. It is true, Eternal One, that you know everything and everyone. You have surrounded me on every side, behind me and before me, and you have placed your hand gently on my shoulder. It is the most amazing feeling to know how deeply you know me, inside and out. The realization of it is so great that I cannot comprehend it. Now, can you think of anyone who knows you like that? Like, down to the smallest details, like maybe even it's silly things like your habits. Maybe you play with a fidget toy 10 times a day, or you squeeze a stress ball multiple times at your desk like I do. Or what if they didn't just know your actions, though, but also down to your very thoughts? Someone who sees you fully, who knows your pain and your joys before you even talk about it. Now, for some of us, the idea of being fully known can feel a little vulnerable. We don't always want to be seen in our rawest form. Like the messy parts we'd rather hide, we don't want to talk about it, we don't want anyone to know about it. But what if being known that deeply wasn't something to be afraid of? What if it was something that could bring healing, having someone know you like that? And in Psalm 139, we see a God who knows us and every part of us. So in today's story, we see the same God in the form of Jesus. He meets a woman. She feels totally unseen by the world, yet Jesus sees her, not in spite of her story, but because of it. Now, we all have our wells, and the woman we'll meet today is the Samaritan woman at the well. But our wells, maybe it's a place we retreat when life feels overwhelming. We want to escape. We don't want to deal with the mess of life at the moment. So I want you to think about, where do you go to avoid being seen when you want to disappear? Not just speaking physically, but also emotionally or spiritually. It's maybe a place we go to avoid people, we avoid making decisions, or we even avoid God in these places. So think about your well. Maybe it's work. You're just diving into work, overworking, maybe more than 40 hours a week. Or maybe it's a hobby. You're just focusing all your time and obsessing about your latest interest. Or maybe it's isolating yourself or diving into unhealthy habits. Anything to avoid dealing with the pain we're facing. And that's where we meet the woman in today's story. She goes to a well. She's just trying to stay out of sight. She's not really expecting much. It's just another day for her trying to avoid people. But instead of hiding from life, she meets Jesus, and everything changes. Now, this story is in John chapter 4, if you want to follow along. But before we go into the story, I'll start at the beginning here, at verse 1. It starts with, Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was making more disciples and baptizing more than John. Although Jesus' disciples were baptizing, not Jesus himself, therefore he left Judea and went back to Galilee. So Jesus and his disciples were traveling. On their way back to Galilee, they decide to travel through Samaria. And now, if you don't know, Samaria is a place that's avoided by most Jews. And this is because of a deep racial and religious conflict between the two groups. Picture hundreds and hundreds of years of division. So I'll give you some background on this. In 722 BC, the Assyrians conquered Israel, and they exiled a lot of the Israelites out of Israel. So they were scattered all across the empire, as you can see from the purple line. Sorry, it's a little grainy, not sharp, but so essentially the Israelites were sent out, and then the orange line shows outsiders coming into Israel. And now the Israelites who didn't get exiled, that got left behind in Israel, they started marrying the foreigners who started coming to Israel. Now, this mix of people were called Samaritans. So they were seen as racially and religiously impure by Jews. They weren't pure Israelites. And you can see that these two groups had very different religious views. The Samaritans only accepted the first 5 books of the Bible, called the Torah, and they rejected the rest of the Hebrew Bible, called the Tanakh. And Jews believed the only right place to worship was in the temple in Jerusalem on Mount Zion. Samaritans rejected Jerusalem and worshipped at Mount Gerizim instead. So this was 722 BC. By Jesus' time, hundreds and hundreds of years later, Jews still would often travel miles out of the way to avoid passing through Samaria, but not Jesus. And someone had made this picture. They think the possible route Jesus took is the green one, whereas most people would take the red one to go around Samaria. So keep this in mind, the tension between the two groups. This is the setting where the story takes place. So they were traveling, they're tired from their journey. Imagine this is all on foot or with donkeys back in the days, it's a long journey. So they stop in Samaria where he sits down by a well. And while he's resting, the disciples leave him to go get some food. And at that point, that's when the Samaritan woman enters the story, and she comes to draw water from the well. Now in the Bible, we're told that this time of day, it's noon, it's the hottest part of the day probably, and she's come alone. In those times, most women went to the well to get water when it's colder, like say in the morning or in the evening, and they also came in groups. But see, this woman, she came alone, most likely to avoid others. Now, you might be wondering why she came alone when no one else does, but we'll dive into that later. Her story is complicated. In her community, she's seen as an outsider. And you know what? Her name doesn't even get mentioned in this story. That's how minor she seems. So we'll continue in John 4, chapter 7. A Samaritan woman came to the well to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me some water to drink." So let's review what's going on here. She's a woman. She's not seen as an equal. She's a Samaritan, a group of people that the Jews hate. And she's also coming by herself alone at noon, not with the other women. She's avoiding them. And yet, Jesus starts a conversation with her. She's someone no Jewish man would normally speak to in public. By talking to her, Jesus is breaking through so many cultural barriers. He's deliberately crossing boundaries. As we go on, let's think back to the setting of this story. It was so drastic, the tension between these groups, that Jews wouldn't even use the same cups or bowls that Samaritans use. And in verse 9, the woman says, "Why do you, a Jewish man, ask for something to drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" The Samaritan woman's surprised, and you know what? Her confusion makes sense. Back in the day, Jews and Samaritans, they didn't interact, let alone share a drink. But see, Jesus doesn't see her as other. He sees her as someone with a deep, unspoken thirst. And in verse 10, he says to her, "If you recognize God's gift and who is saying to you, 'Give me some water to drink,' you would be asking him and he would be giving you living water." At first, she doesn't get it. She says, "But you don't even have a bucket. How will you get this water? You're asking me to get water from the well." But what she doesn't know is that Jesus isn't talking about physical water. He's offering her something that's different, that quenches a much deeper thirst. So in verse 14, he says, "Whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Instead, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." And now here's where the story takes a surprising turn. Jesus asks her to call her husband, to which she replies, "I have no husband." And then Jesus says, "You are right when you say you have no husband. You have had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband." Now, let's pause here. If anyone else had said that, it would sound like judgment. Imagine meeting someone for the first time, and they already know everything about you, down to the worst parts you don't ever want anyone to bring up. But somehow, in this encounter, coming from Jesus, it sounds different. He's saying the thing she hoped no one would bring up. He acknowledges the truth of her life, but yet he says it with compassion. He's not trying to shame her. He's not trying to air her dirty laundry. He says it factual, without flinching, without disgust. And he says it without lectures. He doesn't accuse her. He doesn't ask her things like, "What have you done with your life to have had 5 husbands?" He doesn't avoid the truth of this woman's life, but he also doesn't let it define her. And now this woman is so used to people defining her by her past, right? She intentionally comes alone to the well because of this. But yet Jesus sees something else. He sees her worth. He sees her for who she truly is, her potential, and who she can become. He meets her right where she is, not where she thinks she should be. Now, Jesus doesn't wait for her to be all perfect, to clean up her life, before he even talks to her. He meets her in the middle of her mess, offering grace and living water. And you know what? That's what makes Jesus so different. He names her story without reducing her to it. The world says, your worst moment defines you. Your reputation is your identity. You are what you've done or what's been done to you. But Jesus sees the whole story. He sees the heartbreak behind the decisions, the trauma underneath the surface, and the cycles she may have gotten stuck in and couldn't escape. And we don't even know the full details of her past. This is the only part of the Bible she's in. How do we know how these 5 marriages were broken? Was she abandoned? Was she maybe abused? Was there death? Poor choices? All of the above? And that there's a turning point here. And the woman says in verse 19, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet." Suddenly she's recognizing something deeper about Jesus. She's realizing maybe he's not your average man. He knows your whole story. And that's when she pivots. She asks him a question about worship. She says, "Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you and your people say that it's necessary to worship in Jerusalem." It's almost like she's shifting the conversation to something else, or even just trying to change the topic so that she can avoid the uncomfortable topic about her own personal life. But instead of getting hung up on this question, getting stuck on the location, Jesus says, "Soon, worship won't be about places. It'll be about worshiping in spirit and truth." And then he drops a bomb. He tells her, "I am he. I am the Messiah." Now, this is a huge moment. This woman, the outsider, the one with a messy story, she's the first person in all of John's gospel to hear Jesus tell someone, "I'm the Messiah." He didn't tell Nicodemus, he didn't tell the disciples, he didn't tell any of the religious elite in the synagogues. He decided to tell a Samaritan woman with a complicated story who's at a well all alone. Jesus doesn't meet her where society says she should be. He met her exactly where she was and revealed his true identity. And what's incredible here is that Jesus wasn't just trying to give her knowledge about God. He wanted her to know that she mattered to God, and that his love isn't just for one group of people, it's for everyone. Now, after this conversation, something amazing happens. The woman leaves behind her water jug. It was the only reason she came to the well in the first place. And she's running back to the town and the people she's been avoiding, and she starts telling them, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" And she's saying it with freedom. She's not scared anymore. She's not saying it like, "Come see a man who judged me," but she's saying it as, "Come see a man who saw the worst in me and still wanted me." She met the only one who ever truly saw her and still loved her. And notice how she's not hiding in the shadows anymore or keeping a low profile. The woman who came to the well by herself at noon to avoid people is now running through town, inviting them to come meet Jesus. That's a huge transformation, from being defined by her shame to stepping into courage and purpose, from hiding to boldly telling others about Jesus, from feeling like an outcast to becoming a witness. Now, what about us? Maybe some of us might feel like the woman at the well today. Maybe we feel rejected, like we don't belong, like our story disqualifies us. Maybe we feel like we're too broken, we're too far gone, we're misunderstood, or we're labeled, we're defined by our mistakes in our past. And we just assume that Jesus wouldn't want someone like us. But the good news of this story that we can see is that Jesus meets people at their wells. He meets us in our moments of desperation, when we're trying to hide, when we're full of questions, when we're looking for something, when we feel ashamed, when we're lonely. He meets us in our worst moments, exactly where we are, not where we think we should be. He doesn't come after we think we've figured it all out, but right when we're in the middle of our mess, in the depths of it. He sees your whole story and still says, "I still want you." You don't need a perfect record to meet Jesus. And, in my own life, I've had well moments, times when I felt like I was falling apart, I didn't have it all together, times where I thought God must be disappointed in me, times when I was tired, exhausted, I was done with everything, I was ashamed, moments when I doubted, when I felt far from God. I would ask him things like, "Where are you? And what do you want from me?" Because I was feeling so lost. And, when we're in those kinds of moments, we don't need lectures or rules. We need kindness. I needed Jesus to come meet me in my mess, in the middle of my struggles. Not when I had everything figured out, but when I was at my lowest. And in those times, you know what? He didn't tell me to try harder. He reminded me, "I see you, and I'm not walking away." Now, think back to your well, that place where you hide. Maybe you feel safe there, but you also feel stuck. Here's the thing. Jesus wants to meet you there too. Maybe you're emotionally or spiritually thirsty. You're tired of trying to prove yourself, tired of trying to hide your struggles, trying to put up a facade, fix it all by yourself. But the good news is Jesus sees you. He knows your whole story, all of it, and he won't turn his back on you. He's not here to shame us for where we've been. He's here to offer us a way forward. He sees past our mistakes, our baggage, and yet he still invites us to something better. He doesn't need us to be perfect. He just wants us to be real. And when you're ready, he'll meet you at your well with the living water that'll change everything.